Good evening, grab a cup of coffee and your leader hose and listen to the voice of reason. Watch Evergreen with Leslie Elliott. Voice. Oh, that didn't work.
I thought you were going to sing your Adequate Husband song.
I'm an adequate husband. I have to work on that one
I
for
can
our
attest to
anniversary.
your adequacy.
I am adequate.
Yes, you are.
Um,
Sometimes even extra.
wow. Like
Yeah.
almost super adequate. Yeah, we're a marriage of understatements.
A marriage where we share headphones.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We're
Oh.
bipolar.
Oh. Okay.
Did you watch the Olympic opening ceremony?
I saw a couple of little clips.
Were you impressed?
Uh, I was I was wondering how people would respond to that who weren't already expecting the world to be crazy.
Hmm. Okay, so some people you suppose that some people don't think the world is crazy.
Yeah, that's what I
But you
suppose.
know that the world is crazy, so you've already been crazy pilled. So you're inoculated to
I
the
suppose. I
craziness.
mean,
Yeah.
I I've seen the Olympic ceremonies from previous years that were, I've seen analysis of those that shows just how shocking some of the content that they put into them is. And then the one that really floored me was a couple years ago, the CERN.
That's not the Olympics,
I
though.
know it's not the Olympics, but these are just these big demonstrations, these big performances that are put on
Hmm.
for seemingly professional and reputable
Yeah.
professional groups that have, you know, a lot of respect. And you see the symbology in these things.
What do you see? I mean, you're not really a
I mean, I don't know.
symbologist, so.
No, I'm not, but it's pretty plain that there's this. I'm going to use this word, and it's going to make me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's satanic
Oh, okay.
imagery, you know. And so the stuff at the Olympic opening ceremony was really shocking to me. And then I thought of all the the nice normal people who aren't diving deep into these topics and
Yeah.
who are just kind of living their lives, but then they tune in for the Olympics, and I wondered, like, how does my dad see that? What does he see if he watches that?
Probably
What?
still vote for Beta.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who he votes for. I'm talking
Hmm.
about how he sees
Yeah. Yeah.
what does it? At what point does it kind of break through and
Yeah.
go, whoa, something's really not
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Or do you just go, well, that's interesting?
what was it? 2 years ago, Dylan Mulvaney did
Was
the Bud Light
Oh yeah.
advertisement, and then that tanked Bud Light, and they're still recovering from that. I don't even know if they will recover, but this past year, the Pride Month season was way toned down. There was hardly a fraction,
Yeah.
or at least a fraction, of the amount of wokery
Mhm.
going on with that. So maybe France didn't get the memo,
Mhm.
or maybe it is reifying some sort of agenda that is undergirding these institutions. Like, where are we going?
Yeah, maybe.
And the funny part is, France, the Christian churches in France are burning down. They're
Mhm.
getting, girls are being raped left, right, and center by migrants who are ostensibly Islamic. And so they're basically being what's they're being overrun with a different religion, with different sets of values, different sets of values with regard specifically to gender and sexuality,
Mhm.
and they're under assault, and yet they still have to double down on the decadantes.
Mhm.
So
That's really
it's
interesting.
really interesting.
Yeah, we could have a whole conversation just about that.
We could, but we're here for Evergreen State College. Talk about decadante. Can you recap everything so far?
Everything
Yeah,
so
I want
far?
I
Oh
wanted the
my
quiz.
gosh,
What do
I
you
should
think
have
about
got
this?
my notes out.
Oh yeah, why don't you go get your notes? But
Uh,
you should think about what I asked you, which is the question.
the the everything so far.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. I couldn't do like a play by play. It's you see this kind of inversion of the power of the authority
Mm,
from the administration, and it should be at the top the president, but then they're all kind of cowing to and lifting up this group of unruly, radical, angry, resentful students
yeah.
who are making pretty unreasonable demands and
They're acting like a
requests.
bunch of clowns. They're acting
And
exactly like the people that were celebrated at the Olympics.
and at every single point, the administration has an opportunity to say no. Okay, you've been heard,
Yeah.
and now here's the boundaries, and they keep not doing that and throwing their own people under the bus. I feel really bad for the cop. What's her
Stacey
name?
Brown.
Stacey.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of been a sacrificial lamb for these people.
Yeah. It's a pig,
Is
actually.
it a pig?
That's what they call them. It's a pig.
Oh.
According to the Evergreen. Yeah.
Okay.
But there are sympathetic characters. That's why it's kind of a balanced narrative. I mean, it is very like victim and perpetrator kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Logan's kind of nice, what's his name? Mr. Lies. It's not Logan, is it? Lies, the guy who Chalkman, Chalkman.
I can't remember his name.
He's kind of like a victim, but he's a perpetrator. You know, he's doing like he's kind of playing with the darkness. So am I. Kind of. I'm like, well, I'm assembling a narrative to make fools of everybody because you made fools of me. Like you made fools of this institution. So I'm going to do what this institution would demand of me as an institution that pursues the truth rather than social justice. So I pulled down the pants on social justice.
Well, and Brett Weinstein continually comes across as really reasonable in all of this, and yet
shining
he's
moment.
The focal object of the anger. He's sort of the catalyst, and yet he comes across as really continually reasonable and understated. So that's really
amazing amount of poise.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal poise.
There's some major characters that stand out. Naima Lowe stands out.
Yeah.
Bridges stands out. Who's the guy who's
Jamil?
Is it Jamil? He's the really outspoken, outside, big personality.
If I acted like him, you would not be happy.
I would not be happy. Yeah.
Because of your phobias.
When it comes to.
You don't like me wearing blackface or pigtails. Like there's certain
Thankfully,
things
haven't done that yet.
Certain things in a relationship that are off limits for some reason. Yeah. It's not full free expression around here, folks.
I'm gonna limit your freedom of expression.
I should wear a blue dress just to see what you do.
By giving my responses.
Your stern responses? Yes. Because you believe in boundaries. You believe in boundaries.
And then who else? Oh, R and
Lawrence.
Yeah.
Lawrence. And who do you among the bad guys, among the villains? I'll get you a villain. Okay. I'll get you a villain. Oh, by the way, after this, I get to play this game with Leslie. Leslie's going to play this game with me. She wanted to mirror our camera because reasons.
It's weird to look at it when it's not mirrored.
I'm used to looking at myself as the world sees me. But this is Forest Shuffle. You're finally able to get it. It was sold out for a really long time, and I just played a test game. It's really, really fun. It's really fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Leslie likes it. It's a pretty little game. Tableau builder. But that's not what we're here to do. We're here to finish up the Evergreen State College complete story. Last 2 episodes, sitting about an hour, half an hour each. Okay. So let's go. This is Mackenzie. Mackenzie, I think it's explained. Okay. I don't know what we've already explained about her, but she has been mentioned before. But she was one of the first people to actually speak out.
Oh. Against what?
As a student, to speak out against the protests.
Oh, okay. Against the protests.
I don't disagree with social justice, obviously. Like, I'm all for actual social justice. I don't think what the people at Evergreen are asking for is social justice.
Racism exists today in both traditional and modern forms. All white people benefit from racism, regardless of intentions.
Me being told that I can't speak because I'm white, that is racist, or that's racism. And nobody sees it that way. It's only racism if it's against people of color.
The racial status quo is comfortable for most whites. Therefore, anything that maintains white comfort is suspect.
Focusing on the color of somebody's skin, or treating them differently based on their skin color, which is what they're asking for, that to me is racism.
The question is not, did racism take place, but rather, how did racism manifest in that situation?
I never in my life thought I had to treat people differently based on their skin color, because that to me, it sounds like racism.
No one chose to be socialized into racism, so no one is quote unquote bad, but no one is neutral. To not act against racism is to support racism.
I always treated everyone the same, and that's not what they're asking for. To me, that's equality. Evergreen's not asking for equality.
What do you think they really want then?
The racially oppressed have a more intimate insight via experiential knowledge of the system of race than their racial oppressors.
From what it sounds like, from the things that have been said to me, I've heard professors say, they want white people to feel guilty for being white, which I don't agree with. I didn't choose to be white. I have no control over it, and I don't feel guilty for it.
Resistance is a predictable reaction to anti-racist education and must be explicitly and strategically addressed. I believe these core tenets can be a guide for our work moving forward with actions to educate ourselves and our students.
Welcome, everyone. This is the first time the trustees have met on campus since May 9th. And we have watched the events of the spring with great interest and concern. We've received updates from the president, received messages from many students, faculty, staff, and community members. The trustees take seriously our job, our responsibility for providing an environment for teaching and learning that is free from the effects of bias, that is inclusive and welcoming to students, and that protects the freedom of speech that is at the heart of academic institutions. We want to spend this morning developing a fuller understanding of this spring's events. Everyone here has a partial understanding of what occurred and what happened, what was experienced, but it's not a complete understanding. That's why we want to use this hearing today, or this public comment session, to receive input from the public and get other people's, that is free from the effects of bias, that is inclusive and welcoming to students, and that protects the freedom of speech that is at the heart of academic institutions. We want to spend this morning developing a fuller understanding of this spring's events. Everyone here has a partial understanding of what occurred and what happened, what was experienced, but it's not a complete understanding. That's why we want to use this hearing today, or this public comment session, to receive input from the public and get other people's input and observations.
Protests are to Evergreen what football is to WSU. It's not going anywhere, and protests are part of our fabric. Protesting as a student was part of my educational experience. I wish I had at least 2 credits in it.
For quite some time, the faculty have been acknowledging our need to close equity gaps here at the college. We are hearing this issue raised all over the country, not just at Evergreen. And we heard it raised consistently by the Equity Council and throughout the May and June disruptions by the students. Students were frustrated by their experiences in their classes, as well as by institutional barriers they experienced when seeking redress. This is not the first time at Evergreen or nationally that students have taken matters into their own hands and operated outside of what we consider to be normal channels.
I don't agree with the behavior that has been shown on the campus, and unlike what Anne Fischel has said, I think it is important to focus on the way this was handled. I totally understand that people are upset, but I don't think this was handled in the right way at all, and this behavior has actually been encouraged, and because of this, I feel like people are becoming more violent, and the campus is becoming more of an unsafe place.
As a queer woman, I grew up in rural Texas, and Evergreen was my safe place all during high school as I waited to finally get here. But for many students, this is not a safe place, especially for students, staff, and faculty of color. Day of absence and day of presence, I went every year and was able to be a part of helping plan it. It was a transformative experience, and it is the basis of who I am in the world today as an Evergreen graduate. Without a basis in anti-racism and anti-oppression, we perpetuate harm as graduates with the systems and the knowledge we learn by perpetuating the very things we were so critical of in our classrooms. Having the basis of how to work with people and interpersonally, how to engage in institutions, and how to change our communities and culture is what it means to be an Evergreen graduate. But if it doesn't come with the basis of anti-racism and anti-oppression, we hurt people.
There is no question that we are living in a time of great racial and social strife. Those I don't think are up for debate. What I do think is up for debate is a lack of cohesive, immediate leadership demonstrated by the college during these events, a lack of demonstrable quality communication and damage control by the college. There has been a lack of anything that is demonstrable to the community, the college, and the nation as a whole of any action being taken by Evergreen except to placate a limited part of a limited side of one single political spectrum. The college is not representing everybody here. They are representing a small portion of the college, and that does not even necessarily represent all of the groups that they claim to support.
Do you know that concessions made under intimidation and threat during the protest are now being enacted by the college? That includes mandatory bias training for all faculty. This has come about by an agreement between the faculty union, the administration, and protesters. It was not discussed with the faculty. The student code of conduct is now being revised in response to demands by those in violation of that very code. Do you know that although the code of conduct is supposed to protect all of us, that Dr. Bridges decided to selectively suspend it, giving some students license to threaten others based on their participation in the protest?
Part of the aspects of like the student code of conduct, we've all kind of trying to be redefining and expanding on some of the definitions and some of the things that are unclear within the student code of conduct. And personally for me, I've been looking up restorative justice practices to like try to implement with informal resolutions, because throughout the student code of conduct, restorative justice is mentioned, but it's not like specifically, there's no like pathways that they show you or in like different like examples of like what an informal resolution looks like. And so that's really for me, I'm trying to implement things to make, rather than punitive measures like punishing people for certain things, making it so that there are learning opportunities and ways to like give back to the community and make sure we're being community structured and community oriented when certain things happen.
Let's do some community building, let's get together, let's hang out, let's talk, and yeah, we'll plot for the next one. If you're in the white shirt, you're going to be held accountable. You stand up in the white shirt right there. You don't get to just act out in front of people like that. That's fucked up. You do not just get to... I don't even know the word right now. Y'all know what he did. Y'all seen the video. Look at him, see his face. You're going to be held accountable to the community. Whether the institution does it or we have to do it. There's the call out. Thank
you. There have been so many violations.
Okay, just for a pause. So I went to, so after the protest happened, they literally paid a bunch of students to revise the student code of conduct. And it was an open forum, so I went there. And I sat in on the first one. That's where I saw Jamil. And then that kid, who was kind of leading the very last part of the protest, the very last week of the protest, where George Bridges is now going to state his response to all the demands. Okay. And this student kind of takes the mic. You can see him a little bit here and there throughout the protest, but he kind of really takes it upon himself to, be the representative of the students. And in that meeting where they're revising the student code of conduct, which is led and funded by the college and led by students who actually created the entire PR disaster, he's talking about restorative justice, where he wants community building. We're not going to punish you. We're going to invite you back into the community. Right. We're going to try to make things soft for you, like more humane. We want a more humane justice structure.
Which makes sense in that, it actually does make sense a little bit in that sort of issue where it was just a big conflict, but there weren't actual significant harms done to people. So we're gonna try to resolve our differences through compromise and dialogue.
Through compromise and dialogue and humanizing each other. Okay. Yeah. But his actual behavior is he's going to show John Baumock, who John's major sin was to stand up for himself against his union representative and be shouted out of a room by saying, I'm trying to get what you guys want happen. And then Grace Huerta says, well, as a brown woman, you come to my office and tell me what you need.
He's like, you're my union rep.
But she's your union rep, right?
Supposed to go to?
So that kid, I don't know his name, or I might have known his name at some point, is actually, he's preaching one thing and he's doing another. Totally do it other.
That poor professor. What's his name? John? Something?
John. Oh, John's fine. John was fine. He ended up, yeah,
He's a strong man.
He's a very strong man. He's very like down to basics facts. He's not like really perturbed. I did interview him. It was a disappointing interview because he wouldn't like.
Oh, he's still.
He wouldn't really open up. You know, he's very taciturn. Is that taciturn? Yeah. So it's very like it was really hard to position him, but he went through the whole process of being investigated by the college for assaulting his union rep, and the lawyer that they hired, whatever, like he was accused, so they hired somebody for like $80,000 to come down and like create like the entire, like it was like some sort of war game where like he mapped out the entire conflict on like some sort of chart and stuff like that, and the college spent a bunch of money, and then he actually succeeded in taking Evergreen to court to prove that they were being racist and they were being inequitable and racist. Everything that the students were accusing the college of being, the college legally has been documented being, but just not against black people.
Right, not against the target.
But against white men. Like white men are documented like being racially profiled and like
we can see it right
you can see it, but like the court of law. So he went through that whole thing. So anyways, that was the aside.
Cool.
We'll go back to Mackenzie.
White shirt, you're gonna be held accountable. You stand up in the white shirt right there. You don't get to just act out in front of people like that. That's fucked up. You do not just get to. I don't even know the word right now. Y'all know what he did. Y'all seen the video. Look at him, see his face. You're going to be held accountable to the community. Whether the institution does it or we have to do it. There's the call out. Thank you.
There have been so many violations to the social contract in the events that have happened, and it has been completely disregarded, and instead of actually doing something about the fact that it's been violated, we're changing it. And it's a small group working on this with only one viewpoint and not getting alternative viewpoints to help out with revising the social contract.
The team of students that would propose changes to the student code of conduct was hired and selected by other students. In the documentation for this hiring process, one student commented on a white male applicant. Good application would likely derail conversations with cis, white, liberal maleness. Yes, they used immutable characteristics to select who would be on this Code of Conduct Revisory Board.
I'm here because I feel a lot of pressure to represent people who are often targeted by institutions. And I often don't feel like I have a choice but to be in these kind of spaces. And I'm also here to really center the idea that, like, as flawed as the institution has been, the flaws are always going to exist, and the only way to like actively be combating those is to really recenter the people that this was all built for, which are the students. And the only way to be doing that is to like really build in structures to like help hear student voices. And so I'm really passionate about the success of this project because it's one way to like actively be paying the people who have to do so much compromising and be so vulnerable for the work that they inherently have to do.
So the priority is that they stay in that room. If they aren't in that room, then we did something wrong. So you need to watch that door, watch all the doors, watch the windows. You need to keep eyes on them. And somebody needs to go in that room real quick to make sure that there's no way in that room for them to leave. That's the number one priority until we get our demands here.
Students take actions like this when systems of power and decision-making are inaccessible to them. They do it out of need, out of pain, and out of anger. And sometimes in their anger, they say and do things we wish they had said or done differently. I hope we will focus on the message rather than on the way it was delivered, because the message is urgent, and responding to it will make us a better college.
Any discomfort, especially white discomfort, and any outside pressure, and I understand there's a lot of outside pressure, is only part of the necessary and painful transformation of ourselves, our institution, and our nation that we are undergoing right now. This transformation is everywhere, and it is part of an historical pattern of higher ed. higher ed has always been on the nexus of social change.
We're often told that liberal arts education is about being open to listening to all perspectives. The problem is that the perspectives of students, staff, and faculty of color have not been listened to for many years. And when people are not listened to, they get angry. And I hope that you urge the next provost to do a lot more listening than talking. Because the only time we hear about incorporating others' perspectives is when one white faculty member objects to what has been talked about for years and years or even decades.
I have been to several meetings to speak. I've been told several times that I'm not allowed to speak because I'm white. This school seems to focus so much on race that is actually becoming more racist in a different sort of way. And because I say that, because I choose not to focus on race, I have actually been labeled a racist and a white supremacist. And if anyone took the time to actually know me, it's not true at all. But that's what I've been labeled as.
I watched the video of Professor Weinstein, like a lot of people did, talking to the students. And what he said is that what they were doing would only create a temporary reversal of fortune. And those are his exact words. And I feel like it'd be good for him to stay here and learn what can really happen with change, because he's got a long ways to go. And I understand that this is all about whether or not he's really a good fit for this campus. He said he's been teaching for 15 years that racism is in our genes. I'm not sure how people of color feel about sitting in a classroom and being told that.
I challenge all of us, you and everyone in this room and beyond, to think about what it will look like to center people of color in our lives, in our community, and what it will look like that we all gain by centering their experience and their pain. I ask us to ask ourselves these questions. Am I centering whiteness, or am I centering the people of color that I care about so deeply in my life? Who am I listening to? Who am I valuing? Who am I saying, I want to be in right relationship with you? Thank you.
Thank you.
A student told me that you're a white supremacist.
I'm assuming that students have said lots of things about me. I don't believe I am. I'm
You
a
don't
white
believe
person.
you are, but you accept that you might be.
No. Well, it depends on what you mean by a white supremacist. What does that mean? I'm a white person in a position of privilege.
Okay. I guess that's part of the confusion for me, is the precision of language seems to be lost in a lot of this conversation.
It is. Evergreen is traditionally a very safe campus. Today we will discuss campus safety in the context of the past 3 weeks. I will describe how the campus has responded to those events and actions we are taking to improve campus safety while continuing our mission of teaching and learning. As part of the materials you've been given is a timeline of the events on campus. It begins with our annual discussion called Day of Absence, Day of Presence. Since the 1970s, some students, faculty, and staff of color have chosen to voluntarily leave campus for a day-long retreat. This year, the coordinating committee decided to change the approach and extend the option to people who identify as white. Participation was, and as it always has been, completely voluntary.
In this statement delivered to the Washington State Legislature, George Bridges reframes the events at the Evergreen State College according to what works best for the college, as is his purview as the college president. He starts the story with the Day of Absence and cuts out everything else that I've been showing about how the college itself was teaching the students to behave the way that they ended up behaving, or at least acting according to a very dramatic view of the world and saving or averting the world from imminent oppression of marginalized individuals. While every given storyteller will have their own biases in the way that they frame a story, and those biases and that frame aren't necessarily dishonest, I would like to point out in these interruptions that I will make to President Bridges' statement various different tricks with the story that he's playing. The first being that nobody was required to participate in the day of absence. There is documentation that professors did require students to participate in the day of absence, which means that students, for credit, were required to segregate themselves based on race. The committee that was in charge of setting up this reversal of the day of absence was trying to get 1,000 students to participate.
We are having people of color stay on campus, and we are encouraging white staff, faculty, and students to go off campus in order to make the space at Evergreen more centered around people of color.
The great majority of students, faculty, and staff decided to stay on campus, attending class as usual. But as we've heard, and you know, Evergreen has always been a place that takes on difficult issues, sometimes in a rather raucous fashion.
To be clear, there was no raucous behavior on behalf of the day of absence. The students themselves used Bret Weinstein's refusal to participate in a school-wide segregation event as justification for cornering him and calling him a racist.
This year, the mischaracterization of our day of absence, day of presence, against a backdrop of national tension over many issues, including racism and free speech, produced a level of fear and anger and invective that we've witnessed here and that we've never seen at Evergreen before, to my knowledge. That tension was on view when a group of students interrupted Evergreen faculty member Bret Weinstein's class on May 23rd.
President Bridges is using the mischaracterization of the day of absence to justify the students' behavior. That so-called mischaracterization did not happen until after the students behaved the way that they behaved and live-streamed their behavior onto the internet.
Later that day, I was engaged by more than 100 students who expressed anger about Bret's views and other experiences at the college. Obviously, we've seen a video of some of the discussions. They were heated. Having been in situations like this before on other campuses, I made a strategic decision right there and then. In meetings, my decision was to de-escalate the conflict.
On May 23rd, after being confronted by the Evergreen protesters, George Bridges sent out a campus-wide email inviting the entire campus to attend an event in a closed room on the 4th story of the library building. This event escalated into the struggle sessions that I have covered over the course of probably about the first half of this series, where Stacey Brown, the chief of police, was asked to come without her uniform and without her firearm to be yelled at in this meeting, where Bret Weinstein was harangued, where students spent hours lambasting the president and his administration for failures of protecting them from anti-racist behavior that they never specify, and when they do specify, is demonstrably dishonest or outright false. Furthermore, after that event on the 23rd, President Bridges sent another email to the entire campus that nobody who behaved that way that day would be charged or prosecuted or face any sort of punishment. He laid the groundwork for further protest.
I used the same approach on the afternoon, May 24th, when a group of students occupied my office. And when law enforcement and our police services unit asked whether I wanted them to intervene, I declined. Intervention in those settings by law enforcement, from my perspective and my experience, sir, would have escalated the conflict and possibly resulted in injuries and property damage to people. And by the end of the day, we had a working plan to review the issues that students were raising. And more importantly, our students, staff, faculty, and law enforcement remained safe those days.
On the morning of May 24th, Stacey Brown, the chief of police, as well as Mike Levins, the director of campus health and safety, both asked George Bridges to shut down the campus because there was a widely publicized event going to happen where students declared their intention to take over the campus for the sake of anti-racism. The student protesters, given free rein over the campus, followed around other students, staff, and faculty, policed them, harassed them, intimidated them, blockaded them in buildings, and furthermore, streamed all of that onto the internet to show the entire world how Evergreen State College tackles issues of racism and inequality.
On Friday, May 26th, we had a meeting to acknowledge and address the students' concerns. I refused to grant some of their requests, one of which was to fire Brett Weinstein. My response was direct: we do not and will not fire people on request. Many of the other concerns that students raised were the object of work already underway by staff and faculty. That evening, May 26th, ended positively and peacefully. And here's where the turn changes, for me personally and for the college, I believe. The next day, Twitter feeds, social media, and cable news blew up with misinformation about the college, the protests, our day of absence and day of presence. We were hit with a flood of hateful harassment that was targeted at students and the Washington State employees who make up our staff and faculty. That included the most graphic threats imaginable against specific individuals and family members. Anxiety on campus rose, as you might imagine.
Regarding the flood of negative press and emails and social media attention that the Evergreen State College received in the wake of all of that footage hitting the internet, much of it was over the top and inexcusable. However, looking through it myself, most of it was not that. There were a lot of very solid critiques of the way that this public institution was allowing students to behave. One thing that I've seen to be lost in describing these events is using those hate letters or that negative attention to obscure from the actual solid critique. At no point has Evergreen State College or its administration thoroughly accounted for how they were responsible for the students' behavior. It has been entirely damage control and obfuscation and dishonesty, which has shown its effect in the plummeting enrollment.
Threats of criminal violence to Evergreen from outside the college followed. At the recommendation of law enforcement, and it was at that recommendation, we suspended operations at the college in response to specific threats. Our team in police services, the Washington State Patrol, and the FBI.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay, so I'm going to turn up the volume. So the law enforcement, Stacey Brown, who anybody watching at home or on Twitter, if you watch her face, she is just vomiting and holding back, having to eat and hear so much bullshit right here. This is the chief of police right behind Bridges. She's on camera right now.
Exhausted.
He is, well, she's totally exhausted. She's totally embattled.
I mean, she's being so gaslit.
She told him there was a huge threat. She told him there's a huge threat. They are organizing a protest and they're blasting it all over Olympia to get all of these roustabouts that are protesting all the time, hotbed of Antifa, what would later become Antifa. That is the big threat. And George completely ignores her. And then he's like, oh, but then I responded to the real threat, which is a single call from a man in New Jersey or something, like on the all the way on this side. He's like, I'm going to go and, but he made the actual threat. But all that threat, all the other threats that were on the side of anti-racism were completely excused. And that's the playbook. That is the playbook. And I can't believe we have to face that playbook all over again. I'm not going to bring current politics into it, but Kamala, this is Kamala. This guy, George Bridges, is basically Biden, and Kamala is just like his second command. It's the same bureaucratic structure, the same way of dealing with everything.
Because of what it says, not about Evergreen, but about this process.
It's the process. It's the structure.
I mean, it really shows the damage control, the
shifting of blame, the
rewriting of history, and the inconsistency, the logical inconsistencies inherent.
And the open cowardice. Like, they're all cowards. You're like, wait, there's nobody can be brave. Nobody can actually stand up for truth, justice, in the American way. Nobody can say I'm wrong, except like you should say you're wrong because you're white. You know, basically, you said something great. We should keep the episode on, but you're like, nobody should. Brett's been teaching people that they're racist based on their genes their entire life, but white people are the real racist ones. Like,
well, it was the way you juxtaposed that was really nice, because you have this one person saying that he's teaching them that. How do you think that makes the people of color feel? And then right next to it is the lady who's saying that white people are inherently racist and bad, and so it's like, well, is it genetic or isn't it? What's the story? Like, you stumble over that line and you're the wrong person saying it, and you're in all kinds of trouble. But if you're the right person saying it, then everybody's like, yay, that's,
Yeah.
you're so
It's
right.
it's
So
interesting.
right.
You can hear the crowd in that little session, like clap for the right
For the
narrative.
right thing.
Yeah.
It's orthodoxy.
This episode is going to end magnificently with Mackenzie's teacher, Mike Paris.
Okay.
So we're headed through that, but we still have to shovel through all this bullshit.
8 minutes and 52 seconds left.
Collaborated in investigating the threats. And as a consequence, we added State Patrol troopers to enhance campus security immediately.
President Bridges suddenly relies on law enforcement when the situation is out of his control.
In the aftermath of protests and de-escalation, a few students have been accused of aggression, and there have been reports of vandalism on campus. These cases are being investigated now and will be subject either to criminal prosecution or adjudication through our student conduct code. Either way, we expect to complete the initial adjudication or disposition of these cases by the end of July. The campus is quiet now, as you might imagine. We have finished the school year and are turning toward our future as a college community, as a catalyst for businesses and jobs and prosperity in the region, and as an integral part of the state's higher education system. The question that we face is this: how do we change and adapt to thrive in this era of what I would describe as national polarization?
Over the course of the last 4 years now, President Bridges has sent emails to the campus decrying President Trump and then praising President Biden. He has decidedly taken a partisan stance, and I think it's fair to say, been a part of the polarization that he condemns.
We cannot rely on the lean public safety presence that has been the tradition at our college. The safety of all students, faculty, and staff must be paramount if we are to succeed at our core job. That is teaching and learning, just as Representative Manueller and Professor Peros has said. Our hardworking law enforcement officers need the training, equipment, and staffing levels necessary to ensure their continued ability to protect all of our 1,000-acre campus. I will be seeking help from the legislature to meet the challenges of campus safety that we have.
And the pineapple on the pizza is that after ignoring warnings from his police chief, after calling off the police, he is now asking the legislature for more money to fund more police activity on campus.
Especially since these matters really concern the students' safety in the first place. We've only had one or a couple of biased perspectives on the events, and if we're going to speak about students and their safety, they should have the right to also speak. So it doesn't make sense why students weren't given the opportunity to talk.
You would have liked if it was opened up for public comment, would you have?
Yes, because this is a very public situation. Students have had to deal with safety concerns, being doxxed and harassed and made violent threats against. So I feel like we also have a very high stake in dealing with this situation that we weren't allowed to speak.
Do you think the folks up there and the lawmakers as well even understand what students are upset about? It didn't seem like intent was talking about.
The intent was not talking about whatsoever. I heard a lot of times they were talking about students attempting to shut down free speech, when free speech is not actually the issue in question here. It's about representation and fighting for our campus to have more equity and inclusion for students of color to feel comfortable on our campus. So the issues that students are concerned about in the first place is not even understood by the higher ups, which is why it's important that students should have the right to be able to speak in these forums.
What would you like to say if you could have addressed them?
I think mainly there needs to be a conversation that's had between staff and faculty and students and administration, and there is some slight work in the progress of that happening, but that needs to actually go forward and needs to happen.
Conversation about what?
Conversation about safety on campus for POC and LGBTQ students that are on campus, both physical, mental, emotional, on campus, in the dorms, in the classroom, what classes are being taught, as much as staff and faculty, who is teaching what education they have to teach the classes that they're teaching, what background they have, what training they have. All of these things need to be talked about. And at this point, these things are not being addressed, especially at the higher up level. it may be something that we may be talking at on the on the ground level, on the college level. This is some things that we've been talking about, but they don't know that. And because they don't know that, the public doesn't know that.
Finally, we ourselves must change. We must listen to each other to understand, not to reject or repudiate. It is not just freedom of speech, it is listening to one another to understand different points of view. We also need a diversity of people, attitudes, orientations, politics, and views on campus. The problems of racism and inequity that we dealt with this year are real and must be discussed in a campus environment that offers security for all. They're going to say some things that we don't like, and our job is to bring them around or get them out. Right. And what I hear us stating that we are working toward is bring them in, train them, and if they don't get it, sanction. Right.
I don't care what happens to Brett anymore. He can go and be racist and be a piece of shit wherever he wants to do that. Hopefully, long term, we can just weed out people like Brett.
This is a story of how a Democrat voting veterinarian working with mostly Republican livestock owners became a bigoted professor at a left-wing progressive liberal arts college. It is about a collection of professors that are so blinded by their advocacy that they cannot fathom different viewpoints. It involves a newly appointed president who believes in ideological safe spaces, who endorsed a strategic equity plan that will hurt the very students it is trying to help. Following student protests and controversy about the day of absence, day of presence, Evergreen administrators sent out ominous notices labeling free speech advocates and persons who simply do not agree with official campus opinion as potentially violent. It was a desperate move, using fear tactics to rally the masses and prevent students from thinking clearly. That morning was the first time that I was actually nervous coming to campus. Not because of threats of white supremacists, but because I was worried that someone on campus would think that I might be one of them. And then we got the alert on campus. I could see the fear in some of our students' faces as I helped escort a student of color to her dormitory. Then I decided to stay on campus for a while, and an administrator approached and asked, how did we get to this point? I guess safe spaces can be dangerous places. What I meant by this is that if we protect students from ideas that may upset them because they are different than their own, we also create fear of people who have different viewpoints, including the invasion of physical safe spaces. And these are the spaces that do need to be protected. In my opinion, the primary purpose of an education is to free students from narrow perspectives, limited thinking, and partisanship in order to obtain knowledge. In fact, one of the 5 foci of learning at Evergreen is learning across significant differences. Of course, these differences include race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, etc. But more importantly, students need to learn across ideological differences. When social justice is institutionalized in a manner that fundamental questions about justice, equity, diversity, sustainability, etc., are discouraged, then the institution cannot be inclusive nor educational. We are left with a campus population that is incapable of self-reflection, who reinforces their own beliefs at the expense of others. Once Evergreen implicitly adopts a particular vision and value system, then it takes away freedom of thought and decision-making from individuals that are members. At the end of each year, the college asks students to write an academic statement where they candidly reflect upon their shortcomings while discussing their future educational goals. In order for Evergreen to move forward from this, we have to do the same thing that we are asking of our students. This means taking responsibility and undergoing sincere self-examination. By refocusing our mission as a college that teaches students how to think rather than what to think, we can restore our reputation as a premier learning institution.
Too late. Oh, our volume is full up the whole time. Shoot. Hopefully we didn't do too many comments.
Too many comments, yeah.
No. What are your notes?
Oh gosh, wow, that Board of Trustees meeting, it is such a rewrite of history. It's just an attempt for them to control the narrative. And The more I watch George Bridges, the more I cannot stand him.
Why? Why?
Because he's so slimy and duplicitous.
What does that mean?
He's like a salesman who will be whoever you need him to be in the moment. He will just craft himself to fit whatever is most advantageous to him. He's just got no scruples whatsoever. There's no core. And it's incredible to listen to him talking like he was in control, saying the things that he thinks this are going to be wanted at this meeting.
Yeah.
And then I love how you've spliced in the audio of him talking to the students, and it's the contradiction is so clear. So that's one of my biggest takeaways from watching that. A couple of other things, I guess.
Why do we find that? I think that's a really important part. I think Bridges is an important character to understand. And I think that...
Well, he represents a lot of the same thing that he represents is present in a lot of places.
That's what, I was going to say. This is, when we talk about the deep state, there are some nefarious, like, people in there. There's some really high-powered people in there, but mostly it's people like George. Mostly it's people who just...
That you went to the deep state.
No, I'm talking, when I criticize the United States government, the three-letter agencies, they are mostly this person. People who position themselves, jockeying themselves up to the point where they start to fail.
Well, and in a way, aren't most people this person in a sense, in terms of, like, you talk to people, I don't know if you do very often, but I've talked with a lot of people who are in the position of, how do I navigate the DEI requirements at my institution?
Yeah, I don't want to give it my job.
I don't want to lose my job, but I don't believe in this. Or it's directly conflicting with my values.
Yeah.
But I need the job, and so I am having to say one thing and feel another, or I'm in a position where I'm really trying hard not to lie. So, I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay. So the difference between George and most people, like it's like the white lie, as opposed to whatever he's become.
Whatever he is, which looks like he's much more
It's
active.
like I'm going to acquiesce, but now he's in a position of power. Now his job is to perpetuate the lie. Now you're complicit, using their language. You're complicit in the lie when you don't stand up to the lie. Every time you hear a lie and you either don't stand up to it or you reflect it because that's what you need, you're complicit in the system.
But there's degrees of complicity.
Once you start to get into a position of power, then you are the lie.
Yeah, okay.
You become the lie.
That's really
you become the liar.
Yeah.
And then who are you at that point? At that point, what kind of contortions of character did George Bridges have to go through to have every one of his pieces of bone turn into cartilage?
We are the hollow men, the stuffed men.
Is that from John Bunyan or
T.S. Eliot?
Yeah, you're always quoting the Eliot.
One thing, I guess this applies to what was being said there, but it's kind of throughout this whole anti-racist doctrine, is this idea, one of the girls said something about marginalized people, that people of color are targeted by institutions. And the premise there is that it's a bad thing to be targeted by institutions, or to not be, to be marginalized by the institutional structure. That the premise is that is a bad thing, that is a harm, that we need to center these people in order to redress this harm that's been done. And the illogic is that they then target other people in order to do that. And so this is where the whole thing falls apart for me, and it always has.
Yeah.
This is the point on which it all falls apart, is what is the harm that you're seeking to
redress,
account for? Yeah. Well, you're trying to make up for the fact that people have been hurt by being unfairly discriminated against based on characteristics that they had no control over. So if that's a harmful thing, don't do that. And yet we're going to go ahead and do that to other people. And so the entire thing, that's where it breaks for me. That's where it's always broken for me.
I'm serious.
I liked Mackenzie. I think she was really bold, and she says, I didn't choose to be white, and I'm not feeling guilty for it. I'm not going to be guilty for that.
Yeah.
And I thought she was really brave. That was good. It's
That,
hard
that
for a young person to do.
the penultimate episode. It's got Mackenzie and
This is
Peros.
the penultimate, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last one was the anti-penultimate, if anybody needs to know what anti-penultimate
No,
means.
penultimate is the one before the end.
Yeah, and the last one we watched was the anti-penultimate.
I thought there was only one more.
That would be the next one. The last one in our point of in time.
Okay.
The last one we watched was the one we watched before this was the anti-penultimate.
Okay, gotcha.
So the poetic construction of that episode is you have Mackenzie, who's the student, and Michael, who is the teacher. And they're both saying, she's like, I want to learn. And he's like, I want to teach. And you see the institution being held accountable. Like, I really just wanted to hold the institution accountable.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? When people are just purely unaccountable. Oh, let's do some comments. Yeah. Comments, and then we'll get to the last episode. The ultimate episode. Point curation, always popping in to say good wishes to everybody. Baby Lemon looking up to our Lemon character standing in a superhero position.
Should that mean something to
He always, instead of putting an emoji, he has this way of describing an emoji. So,
cool.
Woo Baseman, BAB, can you please start a Dangerous Space barbershop quartet?
Oh, he likes your hat.
Thanks, that is all. I should learn how to sing. Ben's shirt is even sillier than his goofy hat. This is a great hat. I don't know. You know what? Me and the boys, me and my two stepstones, we all have the same hat. Stepstones, did I just say? Because I'm just walking all over them all the time. Did I?
Yeah.
We're always walking around, and old ladies are always like,
they
love your hats.
And men too.
Yeah. Love your hats. Jenny getting inky with it. Has any of the college admin at all commented on the settlement Brett and Heather and Stacy got? Imagine they weren't happy about it. They're not allowed to comment on that.
Yeah, it's probably one of the terms of the settlement.
Well, I mean, you don't want to talk about a legal proceeding that your employer has undergone.
Well, also sometimes.
But we can't talk about that. So.
No, sometimes the settlement will involve, not being able to talk.
Somebody's saying it's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry.
The well-dressed one.
Thank you.
I'll reposition the microphone. And bad audio? Really?
Oh no, bad audio.
Seriously? I guess I'll turn it down.
Have you been hearing the?
It's probably our audio is probably all. I'll fix it in post, but I guess I'm really sorry about that. I'll turn our audio down. That sucks. No, it's probably it's too high. It's probably tearing.
Oh, sorry.
Very sorry about that.
He's a super audio nerd, so he's gonna.
I'm not a super audio nerd, or else that would never happen. I have audio guilt. Okay, this is the last one. The
last episode.
Ultimate episode. Okay, so this begins at the commencement speech a year after the protest. Okay? So they had a whole year, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, to workshop how to improve their reputation.
Okay. Wow.
And this is what they broadcast onto the internet.
Okay.
We are here. We have survived, and we have made it this far. I took a walk through the woods, and I came out taller than the trees. It's a quote by some old dead white dude. Henry David Thoreau, and it's our graduation theme. I wonder what inspired Thoreau to venture into the woods, a deep, dark, uninhabited place where our vivid nightmares come alive in the shadows. While it is true that Thoreau could have found himself literally walking through the woods, I like to think that it meant something deeper. I think of it as we are unfortunately familiar with the term. In this country, people...
Can I just apologize to the audience? We're going to have to re-record the whole thing.
Yeah, that bad.
We weren't talking to this mic. We were talking to my headphones mic, so people could only hear you the whole time.
That's terrible. They can only hear me through your mic.
We have to get a, Brett and Heather.
Yeah, I know.
Weinstein and they have like a whole studio built.
Wow.
And it's just there.
They have a nice fancy podcast.
Yeah, they have a nice
solo
fancy,
podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I could have been just fancy with them with just enough. I don't know.
Oh man.
Yeah,
that's
I'm really
super
sorry about that.
lame.
It's so super lame.
I'm sure I had such great insights too.
Gosh, darn it. Well, you keep on taking out your earbud.
I do.
Yeah.
I do because I'm sorry. That's probably my fault.
It's all my fault because I didn't check.
Clem62 says start over.
Yeah. Let's start
and
over.
then Real Raven says I only said it 25 times. Sorry, y'all.
Well, we haven't been watching the chat. Anyways, totally my bad. I feel terrible.
Well, it's all Benjamin's fault. I'm
Terrible,
just gonna
horrible, no good job.
pile on him.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for your patience. Well, maybe we can edit out. Can you edit out the clip of us talking between, and then we'll just do some commentary at the end?
That's the funnest part at all.
We'll do it at the end, though.
We'll do it.
We got plenty. All right.
All right. Let's
Thank
start
you guys.
over this episode and.
This episode. You
terrible.
can splice the middle point, right?
I'll.
You figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
All right.
We are here. We have survived, and we have made it this far. I took a walk through the woods, and I came out taller than the trees. It's a quote by some old dead white dude. Henry David Thoreau, and it's our graduation theme. I wonder what inspired Thoreau to venture into the woods, a deep, dark, uninhabited place where our vivid nightmares come alive in the shadows. While it is true that Thoreau could have found himself literally walking through the woods, I like to think that it meant something deeper. I think of it as a metaphor for adversity. We are unfortunately familiar with the term. In this country, people are often devalued in most violent ways if they happen to be queer or trans, working class, black or brown, disabled, neurodivergent, or any intersection of these. And more unfortunately, we are familiar with adversity right here in our own slice of wood at the Evergreen State College. Think of who is most greatly impacted by these things that I've mentioned, how densely packed their own woods must have been. Thinking forward, here is my charge to you, and I invite really quickly, if you're able, anyone who identifies as black or brown, indigenous, LGBTQ, disabled, or any other marginalized identity to stand for a moment. Yeah, y'all look great. I affirm and empower the beautiful work it took for you to get here. I know that you've made it because someone cleared the way for you, or you cleared the way for yourself. And I challenge each of you to not wait for anyone's permission to cut down the trees in the woods Thoreau was talking about. To clear the path for yourselves and let the sun in for you and whoever walks alongside you. And here's your charge. If you identify as white or cis, straight or able-bodied and financially secure, you can stand. Don't be scared. Come on now. Here's your charge. Do what you must so that you do not become the trees in someone else's forest. Do what you must so that you never sow a seed or water the mud or even make a clearing for anyone hoping to be the trees in a black woman's forest, an indigenous person, Latinx folks, South Asians, TGNC folks of color, or anyone who appears along these intersections. This means recognizing your implicit biases, addressing them, facing them as Thoreau faced his own woods. Inconvenience yourselves to uplift the voices of marginalized people and know that in that, you're making space in the clearing for your liberation as well. It is up for all of us to walk through this wood together and cut down the trees so that this forest shines brighter and brighter and brighter. Do this, class of 2018, and together we can fell these tall trees. Y'all can sit down now, it's okay.
To work or study at Evergreen seems always to involve a sense of hope and a vision of possibility. So let me affirm, even in this tumultuous time, my own belief, and I hope it's shared, that justice and equity are attainable goals on our campus if we are willing to be present to the struggle, be honest and caring with each other, and engage deeply across our differences. And as Cabby Mitchell tells us, walk tall, take deep breaths, smile, dance, and seek to define happiness or success in your own terms. And let me add, please tell your stories. Thank you.
I'm a white, Jewish, queer, cis, femme woman, and I'm a faculty member here at Evergreen. I'd like to acknowledge that there were several people of color who we would have liked to have be the MCs or facilitators of this rally who did not feel safe, supported, or permitted to be up here speaking now. So I was asked to do it by the organizers, and I humbly accepted. It's a position I'm able to take because of the various kinds of privilege that I hold. And I think that we should just be aware that there are systemic reasons why the voices of people of color, trans and queer people, and other marginalized groups are not heard in our community and world as much as we would like them to be. And so when we think about freedom of speech, also consider that freedom of speech. And the folks you see with cameras, and media equipment, I can't necessarily include everybody under this umbrella, but a lot of them are students from the program Media Works. And the organizers of the rally, some of whom are in that program, asked their peers to be here documenting the rally to preserve their own voices. So if you're wondering why there's like a bunch of media around, that's why.
I was reading on Facebook and it said, hey, people of color students, we are trying to have a class that's mainly people of color, brown and black, called Media Works. And what I did, with the help of a friend, was take the exact same post and just switch the race in it and the class in it. And then 300 something comments later, the entire school was not happy.
One of the things that stuck out to me was just because I'd spent all of my first year, I was just with the art people. And RAD had a wider range, so I was talking to more of the people in the sciences and everything. And one of the things that stuck out to me was talking to a student who was like, yeah, it was weird when everything happened because it seems like there's a big divide between the humanities and the sciences. And it seemed to him, at least, that there was a pretty big divide and that all the science people that he knew hadn't been aware of any of the stirrings that had been going on within the student body until everything exploded.
During the protests, you signed up for Naima Lowe's fall class.
It was the only film class.
You were also in that class, we don't need to name anybody, but you were also in class with at least one very prime mover and shaker.
Yes. Yeah.
From the protests.
Yes.
I had a conversation with a mentor of mine who can't be here because the campus is not a safe place. We discussed how sometimes we feel frustrated with an older generation of Black people for seeming fairly respectable in the face of whiteness. They were saying, y'all are doing the most. All this fighting and activist shit that y'all are doing, that's the most. We long ago gave up on white people. And so us being respectable is just less energy than trying to fight them. And these elders were saying, y'all love these white people too much. Y'all are trying so hard to tell them the ways to respect you and doing all this labor for them and educating them and yelling at them. And like a parent with a misbehaving child, you give all this labor and all this energy to them. And we just gave up long ago. And it's really fascinating to me when people villainize and demonize these beautiful, beautiful, wonderful Black women that I see all the time on this campus for trying their best, for wearing their outfits, for speaking their truths, for demanding to be seen and demanding to be heard and demanding to be felt and demanding to be loved. That takes so much compassion to even believe that y'all can be better and that y'all can be deserving of all this love. And you have done so little in almost nothing to even be deserving of that effort.
Two things which have been most requested over the course of this series in the comments are two things. Where are they now, and why were they protesting? Seems that as people progress through the documentary, they become increasingly befuddled about what the students were actually going on about. In this reconvocation rally, which I attended, as there was photos shown, the students gave a timeline of events that was cherry-picked and rather garbled, and in that timeline were planted tiny little seeds of reasons why they were protesting. Because of the way that the student had expressed themselves in that timeline, it's a little bit difficult to edit down, so I'm just going to read the brochure that they handed out. What should you know, reads this flyer. Last May and June, conservative and far-right organizations targeted Evergreen as part of their campaign to undermine higher education. The focus of the organization's criticism, initiated by faculty member Brett Weinstein, was the false accusation that the April 12th day of absence excluded white people from campus. So first and foremost, as it will always be up to the present day, the Evergreen institution and the students that were involved in the protest will always center the reaction to the protests. They won't talk about the protest first and foremost. They will talk about what the protests caused in the media. And they won't say that their protests or their actions had any causal relation to the reaction to the protests. They will always blame it on Brett Weinstein and on far-right media outlets and on the far-right's war against themselves as people of marginalized identities and or higher education. To continue, at the same time, students initiated a series of nonviolent protests relating to the safety and educational needs of people of color on campus. One element of the protests, a verbal confrontation with faculty member Brett Weinstein outside his classroom, has been held up as evidence of an attack on free speech. Such narratives severely distort the facts. Students, staff, and faculty had been participating in work throughout this year and previous years to address issues of racism and inequities related to gender, class, gender identity, and other intersecting identities on campus. There was growing frustration with the lack of progress, heightened by increasing national political tensions. Bullet point 1. Before the May protests, a verdict was issued in the case of Andre Thompson and Bryson Chaplin, the two young black men shot by an Olympia police officer in 2015. The young men were found guilty of some of the charges made against them and have since been incarcerated. So, the young men having been held accountable for charging a police officer with their skateboards and then getting shot led to student unrest. Bullet point 2. Over the previous weekend, 2 black students had been detained and questioned late at night in campus housing over accusations made by a non-black student. So again, this is all about race. That non-black student, Keave Duvia, was not a white person. He has some white blood in him, and I don't like thinking this way, but this is the way they think. But he's also Puerto Rican and Native American. So one student of color who is lighter than these other students of color was a part of this back and forth between those parties. The students, Jamil and Tamiko, were not detained. They were asked to give statements, and they did so voluntarily. And they were repeatedly told that they could leave at any time. It's a lie that the students were detained, a lie upon which was built the outrage that led to the justification for the protests. Bullet point 3. 2 other black students were in the process of being expelled for protesting against campus racism. That is R and Lawrence. And we have seen over the course of the documentary R and Lawrence be violent, take over events and snatch microphones out of people's hands and smack people, take their glasses and harass people that were writing pro-Limp Bizkit propaganda on the school walls with chalk. They had been violating the student code of conduct over and over and over again. These events, among others, led students to demand that the existing processes of institutional change move more swiftly. So what this was all about, according to them, was that justice was promised and it hadn't happened yet, so they were going to demand it right here and right now. That is their justification for why they protested the way they did. Things weren't happening fast enough. There wasn't enough progress being made. There was no single incident that I have been able to find of injustice by the school, by students against the protesters. There were some tussles, there were some arguments, but there was no open injustice. In fact, the school had gone full tilt towards progress. As we've seen, they were ahead of the curve. Evergreen was avant-garde progressive. There was hardly any other college as advanced along this certain specific so-called progressive, illiberal lens of creating a utopia than the Evergreen State College. In 2020, the rest of the world would try to catch up to what happened at Evergreen. But there's no there there. I'm sorry to report that. There's no there there. There's only the lack of progress. That is their justification for all of the behavior. What I have now is an interview with a student that had attended the Media Works program that had been advertised by Jamil and then mocked by Kiave that led to the protests. So we get to see what Jamil and his cohort wanted with regards to this Media Works program. Naima Lowe was going to teach this Media Works program. However, she absented herself from the college. She ended up suing the college and being awarded $250,000. Brett Weinstein and his wife, Heather Hying, sued the college and were awarded $500,000. And Stacy Brown also, she quit and then eventually she brought a suit against the college and was awarded $125,000. So here is the class that sparked the protest and what it actually turned out to be all about.
With MediaWorks, at the beginning, someone put forward, like when we were all deciding and brainstorming ideas, someone put forward the idea of like, hey, please respect my opinion, even if it's different from yours, which seems fine. That seems okay. That seems like it could be useful for class discussions. And then the immediate response to that was, okay, well, yeah, so that's good, but not if those opinions harm anyone. We shouldn't accept people's opinions if they're harmful to anyone. And so what is harmful is just left vague and not defined, but what's implied is that it's whatever doesn't fall in line with kind of like the collective orthodoxy of the class, essentially. And then so that was met with, okay, all right, so that's good, but I think that it's probably good to have, or I think someone said something about call-in culture as opposed to call-out culture. Someone was like, yeah, that's good, but I think that what we should do is try to make it so that if someone says something that's problematic or offensive in any way, we explain to them why it's wrong, why they shouldn't be saying that, why that opinion is harming people, but we should do it in a way that offers people the ability to then like redeem themselves and come back in to our inner circle of acceptable opinion, right? So we should call them in to our group as opposed to excommunicating them immediately and just saying, you're bad, you're wrong. And then that was immediately met with some of the more radical or outspoken students in the class saying, okay, yeah, that's fine, but also it's wrong to tell anyone that they need to be civil or that they shouldn't call people out for doing things that are harming them. Like, it's important that we have the ability to call people out and really like make it clear to them that they're hurting us, and we shouldn't have to in any way like silence ourselves or hold ourselves back when we're doing that. And that's ultimately what the teachers landed on. So I think that was like the second day of the class, and it was written essentially into the agreed upon student code of conduct that there is an orthodoxy of acceptable opinion, and we haven't totally laid that out, but it's kind of implied. Everyone kind of knows what it is, and if you don't agree with it, if you commit any kind of like a thought crime, essentially, then it's just fine for people to chew you out as aggressively as they see fit, and there's not going to be any kind of there's no recourse for that. There's no.
So
there's
they
no,
can be as harmful as they want.
Yeah.
If you harm them.
Yes. So there was a clear hierarchy in terms of how the class was structured, and that person was at the top of it, like even above the teachers, to the point that so part of the reason why I was pressured out of the class was because of or part of what led to it was kind of sticking my neck out a bit when student X began verbally berating one of the teachers to the point of tears for an exercise where all the students created kind of like a line, I guess, in between 2 points in a room, and the teachers would give two words, and which were supposed to be antonyms, I guess, and then you would just pick where on the spectrum you fit between those two things. Like carnivore or vegan would be one of them, anarchist or patriot, which I took issue with because those two things aren't antonyms. Like East Coast, West Coast, things like that. I think male, female, or masculine, feminine. I forget exactly how they phrased it, but so something involving like gender. So the point is just like, where do you fit on the spectrum? I think the one that really pissed everyone off, or that pissed off not everyone, but the people that got upset about it, was dirty and clean, because they felt that it had racial connotations, which I still don't totally understand that. Some students got very upset to the point of shouting down the teacher who'd orchestrated the thing and just verbally berated her for being insensitive, to the point of her crying and apologizing and saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I tried to clear all of these with students beforehand to make sure that we wouldn't be offending or harming anyone. And I'm so sorry, please forgive me. And so she's saying all this while she's like crying and starting to break down, because all the students are or not all the students, but a small percentage of very vocal, hostile students. And
you said that they had power.
And they were clearly at the top of the hierarchy of the class, I guess, in terms of who people would just cede to immediately. So she was crying and apologizing, and the response from those students was no, of course we don't forgive you, and so they continued doing that, and berating her. And so then I stepped in and I said, hey, I don't want to discredit anyone else's experience. I just wanted to throw out that I thought it was interesting, and in different ways. I mean, clearly I had a different experience than some of the other students in the class, but I think that I got something out of it. I don't know. So I just wanted to express to the teacher that it wasn't all terrible, and that I felt like I kind of understood why she was doing it, and that I had found it interesting in some ways. And another student then also came in to Surrey's defense, and then that small coalition of students turned their attention towards berating us for standing up for her to any degree. And then the response by that was for the teachers to just call a break for the class for a while. I forget exactly, maybe half an hour or something like that. And the only people that they talked to during that period of time and tried to make amends with were those students who had turned everything into kind of a shouting match, I guess, both with faculty and.
So I have to break in here. It's exactly like the last episode, the one before last, our last watch party. It was you saw the dynamic that was in my last classroom.
Yep.
Where when you're on the wrong side. And if you stick your neck up or do any sort of pushback, you're the bad guy. And the teachers in this instance were trying to mitigate that and say, okay, there's good guys and bad guys, and there's the aggrieved, and then the perpetrators of harm. Even if they're the ones who are being abused right now, they're not on board with it, so we have to agree. So you see this a little bit more subtle manipulation of the orthodoxy in this account.
With other students, in the classroom. Like at no point did they come up to me. I don't think that they went up to the other student who also kind of stuck his neck out. And afterwards, it was clear that that's all they cared about was making sure that those people that they were heard.
How did you feel the learning environment was for that class then?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I don't feel that bad about the fact that I got pressured out of it. Watching all the student films at the end of it, like I learned substantially more about the filmmaking process at a community college than I think I would have doing an entire year intensive there. Like I don't think that they were actually going that much into the technical aspects of filmmaking or teaching people anything remotely useful. It was mostly political indoctrination. That was like the first claim of the class when we went in. That was like the first thing that they were pushing was the idea that documentaries are not true, which is in part correct, right? I mean, well, or so just because any film or media or anything, any like book, any collection of ideas or any like list of facts, whoever is compiling that is choosing what they're putting in and what order they're putting everything in. And so you can't take away human involvement from the process in terms of like how people are choosing to put forward any kind of a narrative. I think that that's the point that they were trying to make, essentially. But they weren't going into it with any kind of real depth, and it seemed clear to me that there was a major problem with that, with just telling all these students that everything that they see is kind of fake or kind of untrue, like it's all kind of fake news. I don't think that people putting that forward are being completely honest because they still have opinions about anything, and they still think that certain narratives are more accurate or true than others. So Anne, with some other faculty, she wrote a piece about the fake news narrative about what had been going on at Evergreen. And so part of my criticism of her and sort of what was being taught in the class was how like on what grounds is your narrative more accurate than any other narrative about what's going on if you're just teaching everyone that it's all constructed and it's all kind of false or subjective to some extent, and it's not really based on any kind of like a hard, objective, verifiable truth. What makes your perception of anything more valid than all of the people who disagree with you? And I didn't feel like she ever really addressed that in a meaningful way.
That's what she said. That's what his teacher said.
About him?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't want to come to class anymore.
Wow.
All right, I should narrate that. So
this panel, the title, the terms that we're talking about today involve free speech and hate speech. And I mean, I guess for you, Jamil, I mean, would you say that hate speech was involved?
Yeah. I think for me personally, the greatest hate speech or the greatest speech that does harm is when someone is told, here's the way that you can be accountable to me as another member of your community, and then that person's response is denial or dismissal. I think for me, it's not when people misgender me that is actually the damaging portion. It's when I say, oh, you misgendered me, and then they come up with excuses or dismiss it or erase that story. That is the thing that actually does the greatest harm. It leads to severe gaslighting, trauma, denial of self. And I think that was actually the pattern we saw most during Evergreen is it wasn't, our expectation wasn't that institutions are going to be perfect. Institutions have a toxic, disgusting history. Academic institutions in relation to indigenous communities, black communities, awful. So our expectation when we come to college is not that it's going to be perfect. Our expectation is that we're going to have enough agency and voice in that community to say this does harm to us. What are you going to do about it? And it's the response to the what are you going to do about it that was that felt like hate speech, or it felt like it allowed and promoted and supported hate speech or facilitated hate speech.
Jamil, did you have something that you wanted to say about this issue? This relationship between speech and violence, or based on what Ethan just said, is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think, and this is where I get accused of radicalism, is that I think, to me, limits being set on what can be deemed as racist enough for action is racism. And I think the people who get to control what that limit is are often not. I mean, look at this panel. I mean, the people who are considered experts on this topic by a majority are not people who look or sound or talk or love like me. And I think that's an issue. And I think that one can't claim to be anti-racist and then say, well, here's our boundary on how far you can claim what is anti-racism, and you don't get to set that boundary. We, the powers that have historically controlled everything, are the people who get to set that boundary. I think that line in itself is the most inequitable portion of what's happening, is the people who get to say, oh, we don't support racism, but we also get to dictate all of the forms in which what is considered racist and what is considered racist enough to take action. And you can take that same word racism and apply it to misogyny, apply it to transphobia, apply it to any form of oppression. And I think that's the issue that we really saw. And I think this is the thing I'm continuing to try to highlight, is like, for me, that is the thing that feels most violent. It's not the other things. It's the thing that says that I cannot say that this feels like harm to me, or I can't say it feels like harm for me enough for people to want to take action. And I think, just as a statement that everyone should remember, and I feel like people forget this a lot, is that America has done enough harm to so many people that nothing feels like the limit for reparations, and nothing feels like the limit to redeem that. I have not received enough restoration for anyone to claim that there is a limit to how we can squash oppressive behavior. Yeah. The one thing I also want to note is that it's the word violence that also got really complex, in which specific powers wanted to maintain control of what violence looked like. And as we know, those voices aren't necessarily the people who could best express what violence feels like for themselves. And so that was part of the complication.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. We could define these terms all day, but violence as well.
Not everyone's definition of violence is the same. And not everyone's definition of who is violent and when is the same. And so I think the word violence has done a lot of violence, and we haven't really interrogated what people mean when they say they experienced violence. I did not experience any violence. One thing I was really aware of is that protest is a skill. And it involves techniques. These have long traditions, and it's not something I have a lot of experience in, so I was really impressed by the way that the student protesters were implementing this action. Yeah.
I'm tempted to think that some of that has to do with the style of thinking or cognition that's cultivated in like the arts or humanities as opposed to the sciences. I think that they
at
sort
Evergreen
of
or in general?
In general, and then also at Evergreen.
What do you mean by that?
Just because with the sciences, there's sort of like there is more of an emphasis on truth and group search for truth, and there's sort of like the idea of like anything that you are trying to posit as being true needs to be able to stand up to pretty intense scrutiny. And it's held up as a good if someone else comes in and proves you wrong, actually, even though it might feel bad, because it's like, I just spent forever on my thesis, and then this person walked in and proved me wrong. But there's sort of like a general attitude of like, but ultimately, for the purpose of uncovering what is like objectively and verifiably true in the world, it's good to have that sort of like critiquing process. Whereas that's not true the arts especially, and then also I think the humanities to some degree, but just because like with the arts you're just like the kind of thought process that you're building is just creativity, so it's just like taking ideas and mashing them together in new and novel ways, and it doesn't really matter if it's totally accurate or objectively true, like so it's more about kind of like diving into your subjective experience or the subjective experiences of others, and then figuring out a way to express that in a way that rings true to others, but you're working in different domains, and I mean I think you're focused more on kind of like an emotional connection, so there's a lot less time dedicated to figuring out how to think and articulate an idea clearly, because you're just trying to figure out how to articulate ideas creatively and novelly.
So that's kind of like the end of the show, but there's one little after, like a post credit that I didn't credit anybody, so it's just like the end. But a few years later, R and Lawrence showed up to a Olympia, like a mayoral meeting, like where you give public comment and you talk to the mayor. This is something like some sort of community meeting. And what happened, just to preface this last bit of footage, was that the Olympia Police Department and the City Hall did a celebration for the Trans Day of Remembrance. And they did a bunch of lights and festooned the building with trans and pride colors. And there were cops in attendance. And R.N. Lawrence took issue with this.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, I have the Royal Majesty.
He actually, R wanted to call them Royal
Oh
Majesty.
my God, really?
Yeah.
And they actually called it out that way?
She wasn't going to.
She read it out?
She ended up bowing for BLM.
Oh, wow.
I would say thank you for having me here today, but I must not tell lies. I'm R. Manny Lee Rochette. I also do work with HeartSpark, and I just want to say, how dare you co-opt the symbols of my trans and gay siblings, while also having those very same symbols protected by people who are meant to eliminate us. How dare you? And how dare you even think about accepting an award for a place that you block off half of, therefore making it impossible for me to get around in the city. I am beyond angry. I'm furious. I'm furious that this town even has the nerve to claim progressivism. Even though we all know progressivism is proto-fascist anyway.
The truest thing he's ever said.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's interesting.
I would say do better, but I know y'all are just, you're doing your job. And your job is to oppress my family. I hope when you go home at night to your comfortable houses, to your middle-class lives where you have to worry about nothing, that you think of me and that it hurts you terribly. 'Cause that is all I can hope for, since I have hope, don't have hope for much else. I give up the rest of my time.
Oh.
Thank you.
That's it.
Oh, this guy R. He makes me so sad.
Yeah,
I
he
feel
is a
so
he's a
bad for
tragic
him.
character. He's ultimately a tragic
You know,
character.
your buddy James Lindsay, he just put out this new discourses bullet.
Was he nude finally for his discourse?
Nude discourses. No, I don't think so. I just listened to it. Though.
Okay,
So
good.
for all
Thank
I
you.
know, he might
Good,
have been
good.
naked. I don't know.
You're not a part of his only.
No,
only
no.
Whatever.
No, I'm not. No. But he just put out this one. I think he titled it "DEI is Speaking Bitterness."
Yeah.
And he talks about the process in Mao's China of speaking bitterness, where they encouraged people to basically air their grievances.
Oh yeah.
And in this case, watching R here,
Yeah.
he's like we've talked about previously. He's really an unfortunate person. He's really struggling. Where's our microphone? Can we?
It's right here.
Are you
It
sure?
should- yeah, I'm totally
it's
sure.
Really coming through?
It's
Okay.
called Shure, SHURE, MV51.
So he's this guy who's really been disadvantaged by life. I mean, really, like he's obviously crippled and struggling to get around, and he struggles to communicate.
Speech disorder, yeah.
And the fact that he's encouraged to dwell on what the gaps are between him and his ideal conceptual self.
Yeah.
The fact that he's encouraged to ruminate and be bitter about that is really, really tragic, because honestly, we all could do that. We could all sit all day long and think about where we could be if we'd had no limits and we'd had the way paved for us. And for every single person, the gap between where we are and what the ideal is going to be a different set of imagery.
Yeah.
But it's very real. We're all limited by our circumstances.
Yeah.
We all have losses that we've suffered in the sacrifices that we've made, or the hand that we were dealt. And seeing him feel that way, it really is evocative, and it's sad that he's been encouraged to think that way.
He's echoing Greta though. Just let you know. He's
He's
taking a page
is.
from Greta. How dare you?
When was Greta? When was Greta's?
It was right before this. Like somebody
okay,
made like
okay.
a 7-hour like loop of them going back and forth between how dare you and how dare you.
Oh, that's funny.
I want to float an idea that
Okay.
is very contentious
All right.
to argue with you.
You like
an-
to
a
argue.
long
That's
our
fine.
long-standing argument. I
About
think
sacrifice. Okay.
What do you want me to
No,
give
no,
up
no.
now? Do I
Okay,
have to give
no.
up something else?
No,
now?
you don't. No.
Okay, I need to stop smoking. That's true. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
you
but
do.
anyways, just about the problems with a post-hierarchical society, the problems with liberalism misapplied. There's always going to be differences between the capable and the incapable, and liberalism foisted by meritocracy can give you like the best of the best can rise to the top. There's no locked in aristocratic hereditary controls on power, but it's an unformed thought. I'm trying to understand the critique of the entire Evergreen story from the far right, what I would call the far right, which is like a pretty strong critique of liberalism.
Okay.
Saying when liberalism comes in and tries to strip away all natural hierarchy, tries to say that the strong don't deserve power, that nobody deserves power, that everybody's equal under the law, that everybody's equal according to ability.
Okay.
Then you have people, it's just a natural slide into everybody who is resentful for not having ability, using the processes of state to gain access and then power. Not just access. So we build all the ours is just the perfect encapsulation of this. We built all the technology to make his life as easy as possible, but because he still does not submit to hierarchy and say somebody's better than me, it's unfair that somebody is better than me.
Okay.
That you and your middle class white lives who have to worry about nothing, which is a great line.
Mhm.
You know, I hope you go to bed at night and you stay up
And you think
and
about
think
me.
about me, and it makes you feel horrible.
Mhm.
That there's nothing you can do to fix my situation, and your entire job is to oppress me, but I am completely reliant on you to be as well off as I am. There's this whole dynamic of resentment
Mhm.
that I'm trying to square the liberal world or the rationalist, humanist, equality of opportunity. It always slips into equality of outcomes.
Does it always?
It always does, because if you can't, if
Okay.
you are supposed to provide equality of so we all know this is the
Okay.
old argument.
Okay.
We're not going to promise equality of outcome. We're going to strive for equality of opportunity, but people do not ever begin at the same place. Some people are naturally incapable. So,
Right.
the entire project of Marxism or of equalizing, of
Well,
equitocracy,
okay.
of fairness,
Okay.
intrudes upon that, and it evokes such a rousing bit of sympathy.
Well, you put Marxism in there. You slipped that into
I
your
slipped
comment
that in there
about
because
liberalism, which it's not the same thing.
I'm just saying that Marxism. I'm trying to understand the deep right or the far right critique that liberalism always eventually
Okay.
results in Marxism.
I will say this.
because it doesn't have liberalism in and of itself doesn't have a structure of forgiveness and inequality. It doesn't
Everything
address
is a balance.
inequality.
I know you hate this idea, but everything.
I don't
really-
hate this
everything
idea.
is a balance.
That's a very imbalanced way of construing my position.
Okay, then. Okay. Well, everything slips into everything else. It always will. Balance is something to be continually worked to
That's why I said
maintain.
liberalism misapplied.
Okay, so yes, everything will slide into everything else. R even says progressivism is proto-fascism,
Proto-fascism.
which is interesting
Brilliant.
and
It's a
really,
brilliant,
yeah,
yeah.
it's great. So yes, it'll slide. It will tend to slide, but equality of opportunity, I don't even know what that means, but equality under the law seems like a fair basis for liberal world order, for liberal social order, and I think that.
No, I agree with you, but at the same time, I can see even that being hacked by reason.
Well, everything's going to get hacked. Always.
Okay.
There's not. It's like
So everything is going to be imbalanced.
It's your
Ultimately,
democracy
you're
if
the
you can
imbalance.
keep it, right?
Yeah.
It is always sliding. It's like I always come back to Aristotle's virtues, but the balance.
Which one's your favorite?
I think about courage. That's my favorite. So the dearth of courage is cowardice, and the excess of it is foolhardiness, right? And so courage being the balance point, bravery. Yeah. It's not something that stands in opposition to something else. It's not its own principle. It is a balance point between.
You know what? I'm going to critique a friend of mine, Brett Weinstein. You see, like, his virtues, courage, and you can see him like always trying to go this walk this line. Or Jordan Peterson, who's also a friend of mine, but like
the
Jordan's
middle point here. People didn't hear the middle point of the conversation. So I hope people can hear us now.
Yeah,
I guess they can.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Brett, how he appears throughout this as someone who's
courageous,
very reasonable figure. He's
Yeah.
very principled and he's very reasonable. He's a very soft-spoken, but he stands by his principles.
Yeah.
And he somehow, that soft-spoken reasonableness is the catalyst for all this madness, which is really quite interesting.
Yeah. I admire his ability to put himself in trouble constantly.
The kids game, you wrote that down.
What was that? You said that.
That was the guy who's talking throughout the last episode.
So they're trying to define the rules of engagement,
and they keep working on it. And you want me to say what I was thinking when I said that to you? Yeah. So when my girls were little, and they're 26 and 28 now, so they're big kids, they're adults.
Are they though?
Yeah, I mean, as much as any of us are.
At least
right?
one of them produced a grandkid for us.
Yeah, that's right. So when they were little, they would negotiate. I would listen to them play, and it's different from how the boys play, because the boys are 10 and 13. And so I don't know if this is typical male, typical female, but I think some of that is that, but also the girls spent so much time setting up the structure for their game. So you would listen to them play, and they'd have like My Little Ponies or dolls or whatever they were going to play with, or it would sometimes be sticks that would be representative of characters.
Yeah.
They would constantly be playing
Rules
out,
of engagement.
and they would be enacting some kind of a role play thing.
Yeah.
And they would spend so much time on the rules that they would hardly get to the actual
That was the game.
Yeah, the rules were the game.
Yeah.
So when he was talking about how they spend all this time negotiating, like who gets to talk and how do they get to talk, and maybe we should have more representation, and maybe we should have this and that. It harkened back to that. And and the boys, they're homeschooled, and so we get together with their friends and listen to how they play. And I listen to kids a lot. And kids being fairly unsupervised, like loosely supervised, where they get to really do their own thing. And this is this very primitive thing, this negotiation of boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's something that happens in the absence of a solid, stable structure.
Yeah.
And so you have to create the structure yourself.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
On that note, and that's a Jimmy, on that note, he says that in the thing. Why are all these black fans about doing this thing? I've played over the past year. Me and your boys, who are now, I guess, my stepsons, are. I guess, yeah. I was trying to be. You were covered in cat hair.
I know. I am. I got like total cat bombed.
We've been learning to play a variety of board games, from rather kind of rudimentary, like Carcassonne is probably the first game that we played, and the rules are pretty simple. You could pick it up, and you're any new players up and running, to some very complex games, like a card game called Arkham Horror. Every card's got all these rules on it, and they're interacting with all these different rules. And the boys really enjoy it because it's very story driven, and you get to tell your own story while you're using these very graphic, and I don't mean that, and I mean that just in very it's graphic. It's like very visual, but it's very visceral.
Yeah.
It's like we're punching monsters.
Yeah.
We're trying to get away from monsters. We're trying to figure out this story, and we'll go through the rules, and they really quickly picked up on a type of legalism. Where like does it mean like any? Does it say this card or any card? Like we pick apart language.
We need to understand
because we need to understand the rules so we can play the game. So it's kind of like a great. I actually feel a lot of joy playing with them because they care about the rules. And then there's like whether the game's good or not, whether they're into the rules, whether they're in the game's another matter. But like that they're into that rules, so we can figure out how to manipulate this thing in order to achieve victory. And in that game that they were playing, it was very obvious, and it's the teacher's fault, and ultimately it's the ideology's fault, because the teachers believed in this ideology of fairness, of progress, of equity, whatever this thing is, which I can't say is not a bastard child of liberalism in some way. Well, unfettered freedom.
Okay.
Unfettered freedom. Like you actualize yourself.
What would be the alternative?
You create yourself. God has no power over you. Kings have no power over you. Your body has no power over you. You have power over yourself. You get to dictate.
Liberalism
your own
works best in a stable social structure.
If
you have a stable social structure, but we are several generations out from that.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And so it does make sense that there's some sort of course correction. But it's like, what kind of course correction do we need? Are we going to be subject to a perpetual pendulum swing, or at some point do we have the power to balance this ourselves?
Stabilize. To enter basically into what would be called a dark age, like where there's just these stable structures. And stuff.
But I mean, do you want to do a little bit of the commentary that people missed in the middle?
Okay, yeah.
Because we had that midsection.
Yeah.
I don't know if people want to do that, but this is coffee shop talk. Yes, it is, Clem. Yeah.
Should I tap into the...
So, going back to the stuff that we missed, the Board of Trustees as a rewrite of history. This is something we talked about a little bit, but when the mic was messed up.
Okay,
maybe.
But I have to say, okay, so George was, there's 2 clips in the first episode that we showed during this live stream.
Mhm.
The first one was a Board of Trustees meeting
Mhm.
where they took comment.
Yeah.
And then the second was the legislature,
Okay.
where they had
Where
like
George
a hearing,
was just talking in front of the
And
legislature.
in the hearing before the legislature, that's where George.
That's where
rewrote.
George was really.
Yeah, and then I went through and went back and
Duplicitous.
forth. Yeah, I
Yeah.
went back and forth and back
Yeah,
and forth.
yeah, you did.
And in that bad audio, which I feel terrible about, I need to learn my lesson. I hope I do. You were talking. I thought it was really interesting because I've met this take from women that I admire.
Okay. What is
about
it?
George.
Okay.
He like there's just this actual disgust.
Yeah. I
with
have
him.
disgust for George.
And it's and I don't mean sexual as in you want to copulate, but from a judgment of a woman of
Okay.
a man.
Oh, interesting.
Like
Okay.
it's very interesting that women judge men like George in a certain way. Men judge men like George in a certain way too.
Yeah, yeah.
But men like George will empower a lot of women and let a lot of women get a lot of power.
Okay.
But they also, because they're so duplicitous.
Well, I think that there's that lack of trust. I think that anytime you start talking about men and women, you're
Okay.
in shaky territory because there's more differences in the individual than there are between groups, right? There's always going to be a lot of individual differences, so it's hard to generalize.
I mean,
but
who's George going to vote for?
if I'm
Who
going
are all
to
those women going to vote
generalize,
for? It's
if
Kamala.
I could try to generalize
Okay.
just a little bit in terms of sex archetypes, I would say that somebody like George represents a man who is at his core untrustworthy. He's not a trustworthy person.
Yeah.
He is going to go with whatever benefits him in the moment, and he shows that. Like, you can see him talking out of both sides of his mouth. Here he's going to speak to the legislature and sound like what they want him to be, and here he's going to speak to the students and sound like what they want him to be. And so how can you respect a person like that? How can you admire him as a person? He is a complete pragmatist. And there's no solid center there. So
Yeah.
if you go
All
by
process.
sexed archetypes and you need a solid provider, you need someone who's going to be able to defend you against whatever the dangers might
And
be.
stand
you're gonna
up
have
with
to trust
you.
him.
Yeah, and stand
because
up
you
to
have to
you.
trust him with your life.
Yeah.
Because like if you're again going
Make
just with
decisions.
archetypes,
Yeah.
the woman is going to take her place underneath the man for protection. How could you ever trust somebody like that? So I don't know. Maybe that's just an
Respect.
archetypal reader.
Yeah,
reading.
this is something we'll explore in the future because we've had a lot of discussions around pornography, sexuality, and pornography's deleterious effects on relationships. And one of your key insights in conversation that we had is like the loss of respect that women have towards men who participate in pornography. And of course there's women who are fine with that, and of course there's whatever, there's all these different variations, but like
It's a lot in
this
there.
core, like
We should have a whole chat about
you
that.
lost a lot of respect. Like a man needs the respect of his woman, and once the man loses the respect of his woman, the relationship is over. You can cobble it together, you can have a lot of momentum, but that core loving
Momentum?
relationship, like if you're married and he's got a lot of money, like there's other ways for you to get through that, but without the core of respect, I don't think you can have actual love.
Well, there's something missing in the middle. There's something the foundation is shaky.
Yeah, and I would counter that with a Christian virtue of being able to forgive, but forgive with the ability of like to gauge whether somebody's actually re-earning your respect. But it's a sad part of life when you lose trust, when you break that hymen.
Oh,
like
we're gonna go
almost
there, huh?
it's almost impossible to get back.
So I just want to say to Clem, he says, Clem, I always assume you're a man. Maybe you're a woman. I don't know. You can't trust a man in a bow tie.
Is it Clementine?
I don't know. Maybe Clem can let us
Bill
know.
Nye.
I don't know. Julian loves wearing a bow tie.
Julian pulls it off, but it's a boy. He's a boy.
He's a boy.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a boy. He might be able to bring it back because he's an upstanding citizen.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. Cute.
Was there anything else that we needed to cover?
We did talk, one thing that we talked about during the space where the audio was bad was the institutional stuff, which is kind of where the whole argument falls apart, which is the premise being that people who are marginalized, the BIPOC and the BIPOC, the sexual minorities, etc., are the harm done to them. The harm of the marginalization is that they are unfairly targeted or left out of opportunity because of some characteristic that they had no choice over.
Yeah.
So it's an immutable characteristic that's not of their own making, that society sees and then either discredits them, doesn't give them opportunities, or targets them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the point. This is the logical fallacy inherent in this DEI stuff, is that we're going to go ahead and turn that on other people. We're going to go ahead and do that same thing to other people. And that is why it is a retributive process and not a logical process. It just falls apart academically. Academics cannot stand...
What do you mean retributive?
Retributive, it's all about justification. It's like, it's an emotionally based process. It's saying we had an unfair disadvantage, so we want you to suffer an unfair disadvantage in order to level the playing field, which is anti-intellectual, which is illogical.
But it's purely political, though.
It's political, but it has no place in these academic institutions, and it is the logical fallacy that breaks the entire DEI thing, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know. I mean, well, I guess I'm trying.
Helena says George is a garden slug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a slug. Lots to talk about. Sorry about the audio, guys. I feel terrible. Like my one job is to deliver you quality audio, and I failed.
Oh, bitch.
And nobody heard you because somebody took your microphone out of your face. And you don't like the earplugs. It's asymmetrical.
I should have left it in.
Well, it doesn't matter. I don't even know if that did it or not.
Well,
the cats need feeding.
Yep.
You have
time.
a show on Monday morning.
Yep. Solid Ground.
Yeah.
Solid Ground live stream. Check us out, 10 a.m. Pacific, and I recommend listening to James's latest bullet.
Okay.
On
New Discourses.
About DEI is bitterness.
Yeah.
What did he say? Bitterness professor.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like,
speaking bitterness.
You said something like where liberalism works within a certain culture, and that's the thing.
Well,
liberalism. From the DR point of view, liberalism corrodes culture. It corrodes the culture that it takes place in.
It's the goal. It's the sweet spot.
But we've strayed from, I have to say, we've strayed from Christian ethics.
Yeah.
We've strayed from the Christian story about forgiveness and redemption. And Jordan Peterson has been weird on social media, but he made a very beautiful post about the process of forgiveness and then also recognition of your wrongdoing and then going through the process of trying to fix yourself and participating with God's grace. Where it's not like I'm forgiven, like it's not carte blanche. It's like, okay, I recognize my sin, I recognize my wrong, and I'm going to endeavor to quote unquote do better.
Okay.
And the tweet that I made just before we started the stream was that I'd rather live in a culture where people are pretending to be Christians than live in a culture where people are pretending not to be Christians. And we're living in a culture where people are pretending not to be Christians. We have a bunch of people taking Christian symbology like we saw at the Olympics last night.
And mocking it.
Yeah. They have no other culture in and of themselves other than the one that they lambaste. And they don't even believe in the one. So they're pretending not to be Christians. I'd rather be in the hypocrisy of a Christian society where it's like, you know what, you say that you're a Christian, but you're not living up to it. But hold on one second.
Okay.
The core of Christianity as a practice is that I'm not Jesus. I can never be a Christian. You're always falling on your face and you're recognizing that you're failing. You're recognizing that. You're recognizing that you always need to participate in the act of this. There's this, when I talk about grace, there's this really subtle move I think you could probably make some sort of weird argument, like evolution is trying to like build something better than itself. It's always pressuring itself to make something a little bit better. It's flowing in a direction, and actual scientists will say there's no direction, which I understand. But like the grace of God is there's always this positive influence. There's always this capability that you could see the light. But you have to like repent and let go of your will and your ego in order to participate in that process. Anyways, what were you going to say?
I guess I was going to say I think it's a balance point. I think the liberal society, real liberal, classical liberalism with a solid social structure behind it represents the pinnacle. And you can only keep that for a short amount of time. So, but we can talk about that another time. For now,
liberals never want to like engage with an actual culture. They want to be free.
Well,
they want to be liberated.
And so that's why I think that it needs to be based in something that's a solid. Yeah, so that's
ground.
We can, sure, we can talk about that another time.
So,
thank you for sharing this series with me. Thank you for.
Yeah. Did you get anything out of it?
I got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it relevant?
Incredibly.
To your life or to politics?
To everything. It's like, it's a great, it's a case study.
Yeah.
That represents a lot of the processes that are going on in the broader culture. And it's a real look at the behind the scenes, all of the actors and all of the extremes that are taken. It's the nitty-gritty details. You took a lot of time. It's long, but it really shows what was happening without glossing it over and trying to give a lot of commentary on it. So
like the third episode, I was like, don't judge the kids, you know? And we talked about like, are they kids, are they not kids? But like, I was reminded of that at the last episode where where we have a student interacting with these crazy students. I don't fear Antifa. I fear the Democrats that allow and put them back on the streets.
Antifa represents the anomie, the loss of meaning that the youth are suffering, that we knew they were going to suffer. I've said this multiple times. I don't know if I've said it on your channel before, but when I was studying psychology and sociology back in the early mid-2000s when I was in undergrad, that's what my focus was. We spent a lot of time on the concept of anomie, which is this bottomless meaninglessness as you become redundant in culture. You have to find your own meaning. It's an existential crisis. What are you eating?
There's too many of them. You can eat that one.
Okay. I don't want to get sick, but anyway. So we knew that this was coming. We had this population explosion plus a lot of automation, and things were just getting to the point where it was hard for an individual to seek and carve out meaning because of the centralization and the bureaucratization of our culture and the way that things were set up. It was going to be harder and harder for individuals to find their own purpose. And we were going to have a lot of people that felt valueless and meaningless. And so that's Antifa in a nutshell. It's these kids, like that's the social justice movement in a nutshell. It's go be an activist because there's nothing else for you to do. And one of the things that one of the people said in this was, I don't think I even wrote it down, but it was about, protest as a college sport. She said that is as meaningful to Evergreen as, and I remember what she said, football is to WSU. That's our sport. Our sport is protest. Activism is the spirit of the age. And what activism represents is jumping way outside of your sphere of influence, your proper sphere of influence, and shooting over there to tell somebody else how to live their life. And you don't know anything about what they're doing. And so it's simply amazing to me that we're actually cultivating that. And when I was in graduate school, we were explicitly told that as counselors, our main job was to be activists.
Yeah.
And
Just to lean
it's
in.
shocking
Yeah.
to me. So anyway, there's lots more to say about that.
No. I mean, this last episode really brought home like how we met each other. Like it was very similar. Like the things that just made you say no.
Yeah.
And stand up are the same things that I was witnessing firsthand.
Yeah.
Saw it. Same state, Washington. Maybe it's just cursed out here. Leslie Elliott, you're the love of my life.
Oh.
Audience, thank you very much.
Thank you for putting up with our audio issue.
Yeah, you provide my life, so such as it is. So you guys have a good evening. Have a good weekend. Tomorrow's Sunday. Wake up early, go to church. I know you don't want to. You might just find something cool. And yeah, there's a lot of bullshit even there, especially there. So, but you still have to make that. You still have to we still need a culture. We're a cult in the search of a culture.
Well, yeah. Can't all be based on law.
Yeah.
In the state.
Yeah. Equality under the law.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Other episode. Let's sign off. Poppy. Yeah. See you guys.
Good night.